From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. This Thursday, Bolivia begins the so-called electoral campaign silence as it approaches Sunday's general elections. The electoral regulations stipulate a ban on political campaigning in the final days before the elections. Political parties concluded their campaign activities on Wednesday. Carlos Mesa, the presidential candidate of the Citizen Community Coalition, claimed in his final rally that his party is the only one capable of taking on the movement towards socialism, which according to all polls is set to win the election. Meanwhile, MAS presidential candidate Luis Arce noted that if he is elected president, he will focus on the country's economic recovery. During the visit of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Brazil in September, President Jair Bolsonaro's administration conducted military drills in the jungles of the state of Amazonas on the border of Venezuela. The Brazilian army spent $1.1 million on the exercise to simulate a war against Venezuela, while the Jair Bolsonaro government declared the diplomatic representatives of the Nicolas Maduro government in the country as persona non grata and recognized personnel indicated by Venezuelan opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido. The drills involved 3,600 soldiers and included the launch of rockets with a range of 80 kilometers. According to a report by newspaper O Globo on Wednesday, the war exercise was carried out on a battlefield in which soldiers from the blue country had to expel invaders from the red country. Information about the war simulation, unprecedented in the country's history, was obtained via the Freedom of Information law.
To announce an additional $348 million.
In Honduras, social organizations denounced the murder of environmental activist Arnold J. Morazan Erazo this Thursday. The crime occurred early Thursday morning in the northern city of Tocar. Morazan Erazo belonged to the Guapinol environmental group, whose imprisoned activists were recently shortlisted for the EU's Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought, together with Berta Cáceres, herself murdered in similar circumstances back in 2016. According to local media, Erazo died after receiving several gunshots. The Center for the Study of Democracy warned that the murder of Erazo adds to the acts of harassment, persecution, criminalization and prosecution of the 12 defenders and leaders of Guapinol who have been imprisoned for almost a year. In Colombia, the Indigenous mobilization known as a minga held its last activity in the city of Cali before leaving for the capital, Bogota, a move taken after President Iván Duque refused to meet with the indigenous and campesino organizations that make up the march. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar brings us the details.
The minga, which ancestrally is a practice of collective work that seeks the well-being of indigenous communities, has traditionally been used to sow, to open roads. Thus, the minga of the Southwest, which today is being joined by more sectors and social movement, is constituted as a tool of political resistance.
Minga means working together, fighting together and building processes together. It is a cultural practice, but then it also became a process of resistance.
This minga, which departed from Cauca to Cali, the capital of the department of Valle del Cauca, demanded a meeting with President Duque to promote a debate about violence and the violation of human rights in their territories. However, given the president's refusal to engage in dialogue, it will finally depart for the Colombian capital.
Before the world, we will make clear that there is an incapable government that does not even have the capacity to hold a debate with the people. That is why the country has become too much for him to handle. That is why the country is as it is, from bad to worse. And today the minga is moving forward smoothly, until they come out to point out and justify their massacre by saying that we are infiltrated.
Before departing for Bogota, in a journey of at least 453 kilometers, members of the minga assured they are prepared for the road as they historically have been, voicing their social demands and their right to life.
What are we expecting with our arrival in the country's capital? That the President of the Republic faces the Colombian people, not only the Southwestern Minga and the national uprising that is currently taking place in Colombia, but also each and every one of the Colombian citizens, because serious structural things are happening that are jeopardizing our democracy.
It is expected that this Thursday, October 15th, the caravan of the members of the Indigenous and Social Minga will begin to arrive in Bogota for a gathering, while President Duque has not confirmed any meeting with the Minga in the Colombian capital.
This Thursday in the United States, the presidential candidates Donald Trump and Joe Biden will appear at simultaneous nationally televised town halls. Both candidates will be asked questions by voters during the prime-time events to be televised on different stations. The town halls, which come on the night when the second face-to-face presidential debate was due to be held, are likely to become a ratings war. The second presidential debate was cancelled after Trump refused to participate in the new virtual format, which was to be adopted following his COVID-19 diagnosis. And in the United States, presidential candidates Donald Trump and Joe Biden are intensifying their campaign activities in the race for the presidency on November 3rd. Let's take a look at some of the key moments of the campaign.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden are packing their calendars with campaign events in the critical final leg of the 2020 presidential race. Trump has scheduled campaign rallies in Florida, Pennsylvania, and even Georgia. On Wednesday, the president held his third campaign rally in 3 nights, this time in Iowa, a state he easily won in 2016, but where Biden is making a late push.
I'm thrilled to be back in the American heartland with thousands of loyal, hard-working Iowa patriots.
Iowa is a state where he won pretty handily in 2016, a state that, even as of a few months ago, his campaign thought was solidly in his grasp. But now, with Joe Biden showing strength there, closing in the polls, which reflect a very tight race, the president has to spend time there. And that's a problem for him. He's a campaign that does not nearly have the financial war chest right now that the Biden team does. And with only 19 days left, the campaign's most valuable resource is the candidate's time.
President Donald Trump and challenger Joe Biden will compete for TV audiences in dueling town halls in Thursday night, instead of meeting face-to-face for their second debate as originally planned. The two will take questions in different cities on different networks, Trump on NBC from Miami, Biden on ABC from Philadelphia. Trump backed out of plans for the presidential face-offs originally scheduled for this evening after debate organizers said it would be held virtually following his COVID-19 diagnosis. The town halls offer a different format for the two candidates to present themselves to voters after they held a chaotic and combative first debate late last month.
The president also did one a few weeks ago in Pennsylvania, where he faced some tough questions from voters, from undecided voters, and left bitterly complaining about the format. So it'll be interesting to see how these two men interact with voters today. I think most political observers would suggest that that one-on-one empathetic connection is something that Joe Biden does far better than Donald Trump.
After the first presidential debate, widely considered the worst in the history of the United States, tonight all eyes are on these competing prime-time Q&A sessions, which some analysts have described as a debate without seeing each other face-to-face or a dispute over ratings.
And in this context, let's review the latest polls with less than 3 weeks to go until the elections. According to a poll conducted by NBC News and the Wall Street Journal, Democrat Joe Biden enjoys 53% support and has an 11-point lead over his Republican rival Trump, who enjoys 42%. Likewise, The Economist and YouGov reflect in their polls that Biden remains in the lead with 52%, while Trump trails behind with 42%. In the United States, early voting and mail-in ballots are advancing ahead of the November 3rd presidential election. At least 13 million people have cast early votes so far. Citizens have already taken the opportunity to vote in states like Kansas, Rhode Island, Tennessee and Virginia. Some voters have stressed the importance of having their ballots counted on Election Day, a concern voiced after President Donald Trump pointed out that there is a possibility that the election results will not be fully known for several months. Analysts have noted that many more people are opting for early voting or mail-in voting in order to avoid crowds on Election Day in the midst of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. And this Thursday, the United States Senate Judiciary Committee held its fourth and final day of the confirmation hearing on conservative Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. This Thursday, the United States Senate Judiciary Committee held its fourth and final day of the confirmation hearing on conservative Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court.
democratic friends.
European Union leaders arrived in Belgium's capital Brussels on Thursday to hold a two-day summit aimed at addressing the deadlock over the United Kingdom's post-Brexit trade talks. European leaders have urged the UK government to make the necessary moves to reach a final free trade deal, while insisting on a need to determine fair competition rules even after the United Kingdom leaves the European Union single market. Meanwhile, European chief Brexit negotiator Michael Barnier noted that the bloc was determined to reach a fair deal, but not at any price, while pointing out that differences remain over governance, fisheries and the so-called level playing field, which sets common rules and standards used to prevent businesses in one country undercutting their rivals in another. The two-day summit is also set to discuss the COVID-19 situation, environmental issues and the bloc's relations with Africa.
Sur ce sujet,
on that subject, I will be very clear. There are several points that remain to be discussed and for which no solution has been found yet. Fisheries. We won't allow our fishermen to be sacrificed for Brexit. We didn't choose Brexit. Brexit was the choice of the British people, so we have to preserve our fishermen's access to British waters, finding a good compromise for our fishermen, and I'm also talking about fishermen from EU countries concerned by this issue, not just France. It's a very important point of this discussion.
A lot of good work has been done. The European Union is united. We have a clear position. We want a good deal, but not at any cost. A lot of good work has been done, but two critical issues are still open. The one is the question of the fisheries, and this is a crucial question for thousands of fishermen and fisherwomen. And the second topic is the question of a level playing field, which is crucial, a question of fairness for our companies and businesses in the European Union.
Speaking at a press conference on Thursday, two Ivorian opposition candidates called on their supporters to actively boycott the country's presidential elections set for October 31st. The call was made by former Prime Minister and Chairman of the Ivorian Popular Front, Pascal Affi N'Guessan, and former President and leader of the Democratic Party of Ivory Coast, André Konan Bédier. The opposition candidates asked their supporters not to take part in electoral events or campaigning in a move to promote a total boycott of the vote. Following the sudden death of late Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly in July this year, who was set to contest the election for the ruling rally of the Republicans Party, current President Alassane Ouattara decided to seek a controversial third term. Meanwhile, the country's Constitutional Council has accepted the registration of 4 candidates, while barring former President Laurent Gbagbo and former rebel leader Guillaume Soro, who were accused of playing key roles in the crisis that ravaged the country after the disputed elections of 2010.
I therefore consulted President Henry Konan, and together, as elected candidates, we decided to solemnly bring to the attention of all voters, all our activists and the people of Côte d'Ivoire, to the national and international attention, that the ongoing electoral process does not concern us in any way. We therefore invite our activists throughout the country to block this electoral coup that President Alassane Ouattara is about to undertake, to prevent the holding of any operations related to the election, and to implement the call for an active boycott by all legal means at their disposal. This electoral process is illegal because it does not meet any international criteria, and both our supporters and all Ivorian voters must refrain from participating in both the distribution of electoral cards and the electoral campaign.
Schools in Uganda reopened after a 7-month break on Thursday, despite rising coronavirus infections across the country. The government has allowed schools to resume classes for students who are in their final year of primary and secondary education levels to ensure normal transition from primary school, lower secondary schools, higher secondary schools, tertiary colleges and universities. No date has yet been announced for the return of other students to class. According to the Education Ministry, schools were ordered to ensure COVID-19 measures were in place before reopening, including hand-washing facilities, temperature-measuring devices and the availability of face masks. Uganda has reported over 10,000 COVID-19 cases and 95 deaths. Despite a rise in cases, the numbers still remain comparatively low.
The transport ban remains in place so workers at reopened premises will have to commute.
In Yemen, a landmark prisoner exchange between the Saudi-backed government and the Houthi movement began Thursday with hundreds of combatants heading home. The swap is a sign of progress in the process to end the conflict which broke out 6 years ago following the Saudi-led intervention in the country. The warring sides agreed to exchange more than 1,000 prisoners under a deal struck in Switzerland last month. The International Committee of the Red Cross is handling the logistics of the complex two-day operation. The planned prisoner exchange comes after the release on Wednesday of 2 US citizens held captive in Yemen in exchange for some 240 Houthi supporters who are allowed to return home after being stranded in Oman. According to local sources in Afghanistan, 41 people were killed in an attack on a police station. According to a statement released by the local police chief, a police base outside Kalat city, the capital of Afghanistan's southern Sabul province, was struck on Thursday by a blast caused by a vehicle bomb, followed by a gunfight with Taliban rebels, with more than 15 insurgents having been reported killed and 26 others, including 6 police personnel, wounded. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet has called on governments worldwide to redouble their efforts to prevent rape and other forms of sexual violence, improve access to justice and reparations for victims, and ensure prompt criminal investigations and prosecutions of perpetrators.
In the wake of numerous reports of horrific rapes in various parts of the world in recent weeks, people have rightly been outraged and are demanding justice for the victims and measures to prevent sexual assaults. I share the outrage and stand in solidarity with the survivors and with those demanding justice. But I am concerned that there are also calls, and in some places laws already being adopted, bringing in cruel and inhuman punishments and the death penalty for perpetrators. The main argument being made for the death penalty is for it to deter rape, but in fact, there is no evidence that the death penalty deters crime more than other forms of punishment. Evidence shows that the certainty of punishment, rather than its severity, deters crime. In most countries around the world, the key problem is that victims of sexual violence do not have access to justice in the first place, whether due to a stigma, fear of reprisals, entrenched gender stereotypes and power imbalances, lack of police and judicial training, laws that condone or excuse certain types of sexual violence, or the lack of protection for victims. The death penalty consistently and disproportionately discriminates against the poor and most marginalized individuals and often results in further human rights violations. I urge states to adopt a victim-centered approach to fighting the scourge of rape and other sexual violence. It is crucial that women are active participants in designing measures to prevent and address these crimes, and that law enforcement and judicial officials receive the requisite training in handling such cases. Tempting as it may be to impose draconian punishment on those who carry out such monstrous acts, we must not allow ourselves to commit further violations.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.